Hello, my kako. My name is Kawika Winter. I am the director of the Heʻeia National Estuarine Research Reserve. I work in the realm of biocultural restoration, which is a form of conservation that realizes that humans and nature are part of the same system. And so when we endeavor to restore the health and function of our spaces, for people like me, that means reconnecting the families who are from the place to the place, because quite often they've been disconnected, or anybody that's new to Hawaii, helping them to foster connections to their new home. I mean, Hawaiian language and culture and place are interwoven. The Hawaiian language was born out of this aina. And so if you look at the evolution of languages in Polynesia, they've evolved in large part due to the spaces that those languages existed in. So we have words in Hawaii that don't exist in other Polynesian languages because there are natural phenomena here, or biodiversity here, or biocultural diversity here that exists nowhere else in the planet. So that's when, on an evolutionary trajectory, languages start to evolve on different trajectories. And so there is no Hawaiian language without Hawaii. Mo'olelo are the foundation of our work. So they help to inform the relationship of people to place, and they help us to inform the work that we do and how we approach our work. We don't do our scientific research out here in a way that's separate from the community. We're trying to interweave the work that we do with the community, and we position our research to help answer the questions that our community is asking. There is no biocultural work without community. Biocultural work is predicated on the presence of community, not only now, but long into the future. So a lot of our community-based subsistence fishing areas that we have going on throughout Hawaii right now is one in Ha'ena, Miloli'i, Kipahulu. These are communities that have said, we've been here for a long time, we're going to continue being here for a long time, and we've always eaten from this place, and we want to our future generations to always eat from this place. And so when you say that from a Pacific Islander perspective, what that means is we have a vested interest of caring for this place, because if we didn't care for it, it wouldn't feed us. And this is like the way we think in our Pacific Islands. We take care of our islands and they take care of us. So I think a lot of people, when they hear, it might sound a little bit like we only care about extracting, but it's really all about caring. That's what kuleana is. Kuleana is caring for a place, and if you care for a place, then if you fulfill your responsibility of caring for a place, then you have the right to access and have that place feed you. And it's always this reciprocal thing between communities and places that where our notions of aina momona are born, which is sustainable resource abundance in perpetuity. Well, indigenous science and conventional science, as I call it, are different ways of looking at things. So I think they're both in pursuit of understanding what's happening in the world around us, but there are different approaches to asking those questions, answering those questions. So it's kind of like looking at flip sides of the coin. Sometimes not even look at the same coin. But I think the important thing to recognize is that there are multiple ways of understanding any one thing that we're trying to understand in the world, and indigenous ways of knowing, one pathway of which is indigenous science, is a way that of approaching understanding the world that generally isn't taught in universities and generally isn't embraced by conventional science. I don't know that anything started this passion. This is just the way I am. This is the way I've always been. I've always been passionate about conservation, and growing up in Hawaii and witnessing that quite often Native Hawaiian communities and conservationists are at odds with each other, and at a very young age I found myself struggling to understand why, when if anybody really cares about taking care of these islands, it's going to be conservationists and Native Hawaiians. So why are so many instances where these are opposing groups? And so I think I've spent my career trying to understand that and try to be a bridge between these two approaches of caring for our islands so that we can work together instead of working against each other. When you ask questions about teaching, I tend to fall back on Hawaiian language as I think about answers. And so when you look at what the word for teaching is in Hawaiian, it's the same word as learning. It's a'o. A'o happens. If a'o is happening this way, then it's teaching. If a'o is happening this way, it's learning. But that's a'o. So there is no separating out teaching and learning from a Native Hawaiian perspective. And so, I know the things I know because a'o has happened. And things that I know will get passed on because a'o will continue to happen in multiple directions and sometimes at the same time, right? And so I think, mo'oku auhau, or genealogy, is a really important cultural concept that is valued here in Hawaii. And so, people like me think of teaching as a genealogy, as a legacy. These are the lines of knowledge that have informed me, and these are the lines of knowledge that are coming out of me that I'm contributing to. I'm fortunate to also be a teaching professor at the university, and so it's a nice avenue for me to help to shape the minds of the future leaders of Hawaii and the world in this perspective of biocultural restoration, conservation, indigenous science, those kinds of things. Well, in Hawaii, there's a growing movement of what we're calling pono science, which means doing science in the right way. Pono science is founded on a way of engaging in conducting science and creating knowledge that's reciprocal. People like me have decided to spend our careers at the University of Hawaii because we are trying to demonstrate what pono science looks like. Something I talk about a lot is this notion of how humans are separate from and intrinsically bad for nature, and that actually is not founded in science. That's a social construct of the neoclassical worldview that's so deeply embedded in university-based knowledge systems that it's treated as if it's a scientific fact. And so you have conservationists endeavoring to do conservation with this inherent bias that humans are not a part of nature. And you have scientists conducting research, designing methodologies, interpreting data, writing conclusions that are predicated on this bias of humans are separate from nature. But if you actually look at what science tells us, that's not what science tells us. I mean, just look at evolutionary biology. There was no point at which humans budded off of the tree of life and became this thing that's not related to anything else. We are related to everything on this planet. And in that sense, indigenous cultures, or the creation stories that are told by indigenous cultures all over the world, align with evolutionary biology, because indigenous creation stories tend to place humanity as the younger sibling in a family. I think it's really important to recognize that this notion that humans are separate from nature is a social construct, and it's a social construct that was brought to Hawaii by colonizing cultures. And so when you show up and this isn't only true in Hawaii, this is true for every indigenous space that I have any knowledge or experience with. When you show up into these spaces with this colonizer way of thinking that has humans being separate from and inherently bad for nature, you're going to meet resistance. And so, okay, well, if this is a social construct, this is an inherent bias, how do we cut this out of the work that we do? And if we do, what does our science look like? What does our ecology look like? What does our conservation look like when this social construct that's imposed by colonizers on indigenous places is cut out of the work? And quite often that tends to be a little bit mind-blowing for a lot of people. So they're stuttering at an answer. What would that look like for you? And so that's advice and the challenge that I would give to aspiring and emerging ecologists and conservationists is try to see a world where you don't have that social construct of humans being inherently bad for nature. What does that mean for the work you do in the rest of your career? I don't know if I'd look at it as an achievement, but one of the things that I was involved in that I'm so proud of is working to establish the Heʻeia community-based subsistence fishing area, which was the first fully functioning community-based subsistence fishing area, not only in Hawaii, but the world. And so that really has, been built on decades of efforts by community. In the process we've had of waiting and struggling and endeavoring to get that CBSFA established. We've had kūpuna that have passed on, we've had babies that were born, and this has been a multi-generational endeavor. And to see it all the way through and help it to open the door for other communities like Miloli'i and Kipahulu, now and others in the future. Yeah, that was really awesome, and very honored to have been a part of that effort. One thing that Hawaii should be really proud of is that we are, on a global scale, one of the leaders of biocultural restoration. Because in Hawaii, we have conservation efforts that are grounded in the indigenous culture, Native Hawaiian culture. So many of the elders that came before me and some of the elders who have taught me have always said, Hawaii has the answers that'll help to heal the world. And this is part of what they're talking about, is if you identify people as a problem and teach our children that humans are the problem, our children are raised up not to see themselves as a part of the solution. If we want to see our kids being a part of the solutions, we need to change the stories that we're telling them. We have older stories in that, or older stories that teach us what our positionality is in these islands and teach us what our responsibility is to care for these islands and care for our families and care for our communities. So let's look to those stories. So again, policy is another one of these things that has been shaped by this notion that humans are separate from nature. So how do I've talked earlier about, letting go of that inherent bias, that social construct, when we endeavor to engage in science and engage in conservation. And I advocate for the same thing in policy. If our policies are in place that are structured on this notion that humans are separate from and inherently bad for nature, our policy interpretations are going to reflect that. So as a good example, we have the Endangered Species Act, and we have really strong endangered species protections in Hawaii, which is important because we're the endangered species capital of the world. And so, of course, yes, we should have strong protections in place. But when those laws are interpreted that position humans as inherently bad for nature, it makes it really hard for communities who care about these species, who care about the well-being of these species, to actually engage in indigenous practices, indigenous lifeways that are benefiting these species. So no, we need to, create a barrier. We need to put up a fence. We need to create a buffer, 30-meter buffer, or whatever it is, around an endangered waterbird nest. And that means that terra farmers can't go within 30 meters. Well, it means that terra farmers can't take care of the lo'i that the waterbirds are nesting in. So, we need to start making those shifts in the policy realm as well and recognize that humans aren't inherently bad. So we need to shift policy away from all humans are bad to really identifying the practices and the actions and the management that's bad for endangered species, and then embrace the ones that are good. And that's really what biocultural restoration is all about. I actually don't spend too much time thinking about the future all that much, or what impact I'm going to have. I just put one foot in front of the other, keep doing the work that I think is the right work to do, and I just hope that whatever work that I do has beneficial impacts to this place that I love, Hawaii, and the community that I love, and we'll see what happens.